So welcome to our American Pilgrims discussion of Camino Skies, which is a documentary of some pilgrims who walked the Camino. And I am going to start us off today with showing the trailer of the movie. So those of you guys maybe who didn't get an opportunity to watch the movie, you'll be able to see just pieces of it here as we get started.
Allison, do you know that there's no volume?
I didn't. I apologize for that. Thank you.
Don't put that in the movie.
I apologize for that. I will put the link to this in the chat so that if you would like to watch it with the sound, then you will have the ability to do that. So, guys, we have Fergus Grady and Noel Smith, and their information is on the website as well, which I'll also put that in the chat. But I'm going to turn it over to Noel and Fergus to get us started today.
Yeah, hi everyone. Noel Smith here, one half of the filmmaking team with Fergus, who'll pop up later, I'm sure. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us here. This film is, well, has been a total labor of love for Fergus and I. It was our first feature documentary that we've ever made. It was self-funded. We shot it in 2017 over 42 days with a tiny crew of 3 people, including us, and then we released it in 2018, and it's kind of just done better than we could have ever hoped, and found a really warm reception amongst the Camino community and the wider community in general, which was just quite amazing for us. So yeah, it's been like the Camino itself. It's been a really interesting journey. It's been really difficult as a small kind of independent filmmaking team, but it's been incredibly rewarding. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for everyone that's watched the film so far. A big thank you. And yeah, if you haven't seen the film yet, please check it out. It's should be, I'm not quite sure where it is in the States. It's on iTunes and a couple of the other VOD platforms. But yeah, thanks for joining.
I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name's Fergus Grady.
Normally I'm in New Zealand, which is where half of the pilgrims in the film are from, but Noel and I are in Australia at the moment, finishing our next film, which is exciting, which isn't about the Camino, but we have great memories of walking the Camino, and we're still in touch with the pilgrims in the film, and we miss the Camino every day, I'm sure, like everyone else. So looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, guys. So those of you who are joining us today, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I'll start with the first question for y'all. How did this project start? What is your connection to the Camino? How did this kind of idea come to y'all?
Yeah, so it was an interesting start to it, really. Fergus and I had been working together over a number of years. We met on a short film where we were both sort of assisting. I was assisting in camera department and Fergus was in the sound department. And I guess for us, we just got to a point where we were kind of tired of assisting and we wanted to go out and make our own film. We had no idea what it would be about, and Fergus asked the question one day. He was like, "Oh, you know, what do you think about making a film about the Camino?" And at that point, I knew very little of the Camino, apart from the fact that my wife had walked it 10 years earlier at a very pivotal moment in her life. So I knew that it was, and she'd been telling me these stories about her experiences on the Camino for those 10 years, and it sounded incredible. So I knew it had the power to really change and affect people. And yeah, and then the more Fergus and I started kind of digging and exploring the potential for a film there, the more we realized that it was just the perfect setting that, you know, that you could ever ask for a documentary to be on. There's incredibly interesting people everywhere you go, amazing scenery. As far as making a film independently, it's very cheap, like relatively to film, compared to most really interesting locations. And like we could food was quite affordable, accommodation was quite affordable. We stayed with all our subjects every night in the albergues. Yeah, and then it just kind of started from there. And then we sort of started looking for characters or potential people that we could follow their journeys on the Camino. And from there, we set a date and we told everyone that we'd be walking from this date to this date. And then we all met each other the night before we started filming and had a lovely dinner together, and then jumped into it the next morning.
So the pilgrims that are featured in there did not know each other as y'all were forming the group.
Yeah. So I guess we we had invited people to walk with us, and there were 3 people from New Zealand and three people from Australia. So everyone met in St. Jean Pied de Port for the first time, except for 2 people from Australia. They knew each other. So it was kind of a meetup group, but we were filming. So immediately people bonded, and if you watch the film, some of the pilgrims bond and become best friends, and others have little, maybe, you know, arguments. So it's Noel and I basically observing, you know, 35 days of walking the Camino Frances. So yeah, I hope people get a chance to watch it. I do note Harriet in the chat mentioned she'd seen it, and was there anywhere that she could buy the DVD in the States? At this point, no, it's only available to buy through our Australian shipping. So you could buy that through the CaminoSkies.com and it'll ship from Australia, but not in the States at the moment.
You can watch it online, which is what I did from the States. And you can purchase it forever. So you can virtually have it as a DVD replacement.
I'm going to open it up to
Exactly.
questions. Anybody want to come off mute and ask a question? If not, you can put it in the chat. That's okay too. Either question in the chat came through. Have you screened the film at any festivals, documentary festivals?
Yeah, so in America, we screened at the Newport Beach Film Festival. That was our world premiere in California, so that was fantastic. Noel and I were both there. We also screened at the Portland Film Festival and the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival. And Noel can probably talk to the other film festivals we screened around the world.
Yeah, sorry, Fergus, you just cut out there for me. So I missed what festivals you mentioned, but yeah, it's definitely screened at a few festivals. It went to cinemas much sooner than we'd thought. Which was a lovely difficulty to have, I guess, that people wanted it in cinemas straight away. But yeah, the festival reception was great, especially in America. We were blown away. It was the first time we'd shown an audience outside of Australia, so we weren't sure how it would be received. And we had such incredible feedback after the show and talking to the audience after the festival. So that was quite touching. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you said you put out the call for these participants, but had such fascinating stories. And was it completely random? I mean, did you just put out like to a Camino organization in your two countries that this was a possibility and it was just who came forward? Or was there any attempt to, have an older group or, something that identified that you would get the kind of people you got on this journey?
Yeah, we cast the net quite wide when we were looking for people. Ideally, we would have set up on the Camino and waited for these great characters to kind of come on through and then follow their journey from there. But we knew, just as an independent film team, self-funding it, we just couldn't afford that. So we knew we had to find our subjects before we left. And really the only the only things we wanted to find were Australians and New Zealanders, just because it was for our homes. So yeah, we knew of Sue and Claude through the local Australian Camino communities. So they were quite big characters here, and so we'd sort of started chatting to them. And then Fergus came across Terry's story in the newspaper, and then sort of reached out to him, and then through him found Mark. And for Julie and Cheryl, we put a call out in a Camino newsletter, and we just told people we're planning on making a film. We'll be filming and walking from in between these dates, and that if you were interested in walking the Camino and had an interesting story to share and would feel comfortable having a camera follow you through all those difficult moments, then please get in touch. And so we had a bunch of people contact us, and then we'd kind of just, really it was a phone call to people just to find out a little bit about their story, but not too much. We sort of didn't want to over prepare the subjects or anything. We didn't want to find out too much, because I sort of feel like that takes away from the curiosity that then you naturally have when you meet someone for the first time. So yeah, and we were just blown away with everything that happened, and with their stories and their deeper stories. We going into it, we knew their surface level stories, but once you start talking to people and really digging into their real story, it suddenly becomes so much more interesting.
Amy?
Yes, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'll just start by saying I had the pleasure of watching this film several times and then reviewing it for La Concha, which is the American Pilgrims magazine. And that ran in last December's or winter issue. And I really loved the film and appreciated it. I think I'm kind of surprised, like Allison, to learn that it was just kind of serendipity that you kind of arrived at the mix of pilgrims that you did who all had different stories of personal challenge or loss. And that, I think, is part of what made the story or the film so powerful. So my question is maybe a little bit of gallows humor that I took from the film. So there was a moment, and I know this film was completed before COVID, right? And this was filmed before COVID, obviously, but there was a moment as I was watching the film that struck me really funny in a gallows humor kind of way when Mark is speaking about after the death of his daughter, like the outpouring of support from his community and like people were dropping off meals and doing all this stuff. And then he just kind of mentions in passing, and people brought us a bunch of toilet paper. And I was like, what? Like, is that a thing there? Or is that like a euphemism? But then I chuckled and I was like, well, if he really did get a bunch of toilet paper, that was really helpful during COVID. When we had the toilet paper crisis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we had the same thing here, and COVID, we're all through COVID, all through lockdowns. I'm based in Melbourne, so we were in quite strict lockdowns for a lot of the time, and all through that process, we were just dreaming of being back on the Camino. Yeah, lots of fond memories on it, and yeah, it is a good moment in the film.
I think Mark, if I think about Mark as a character, he's very sensitive, but he has this kind of tough man. He's quite a big guy. So I think he always brought it back to, even the saddest moments of his life, he brought it back to humor. And having Terry with him allowed for them to open up, which was great on camera in the film.
Yeah, their story was very beautiful together, I thought, seeing a father-in-law and a son-in-law in that way. I think one of the most powerful moments was when he took him to the church, and I believe it was in Rabanal, and he talked about how when Terry had been previously there on a Camino, he had been at that church and developed some contacts and relationships with people. So then when his daughter was sick, and then Mark's other daughter was also sick at some moment as well, and I think he was thinking like something might happen to his second daughter as well. And so Terry had asked people there to pray for them. And so then he wanted to take Mark to the church to see like where people prayed, and just seeing Mark's reaction to that was very powerful as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes in the film too. I think there was a question.
There is a question in the chat. Were you guys in good shape when you started the Camino? How did you handle the physical aspect of the trip? And I'll add on to that, especially because I'm assuming you're moving, cameras and equipment and things like that on top of whatever you're carrying too.
I was in okay shape, but I know Noel had been training because he needed to, because our camera equipment and the actual camera were, I don't know how many pounds in American, but how many, Noel? What was your pack?
My pack was about 17 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds. And the camera itself was about 5 kilos. And I'd sort of just swapped the camera between hands as I walked. And we it was probably the fittest I'd ever been in my life. And going into that, I think because we had a bit of lead time, we had to save some money before we could go make the film. So we had some time. So as soon as we knew that we were going to make the film, I started getting in shape a little bit, just because I knew that I'd have to hold the camera and try and hold it steady. And, and as we wanted to capture all these great moments as they happened and not necessarily try and get everything, find out about it, but then try and get it in an interview later. We wanted to be right there with everyone as they had these little incredible moments or musings or whatever it might be. So we knew we had to be in relatively good shape. And even then, I'm sure if anyone's seen it, it's still quite a shaky film. And that was me, trying to catch up to people, and then I'd be trying to catch my breath. And so it was very challenging. And the walking, it's what can I say? It's quite grueling I'm sure, as lots of you know, you get up day after day and do the same thing and eventually find a rhythm, but there's moments there where it's really, really challenging. And I think going into it, I didn't have a walking stick, and I really felt that in one of my knees, kind of maybe after about 10 days, one of my knees really started hurting. And so Terry lent me one of his walking sticks, which was great, which meant that I could have that sort of tucked away in my backpack as I walked and filmed with the camera. And then as soon as I wasn't filming, I'd whip out the walking stick, and that made a huge difference. But it was definitely a challenge as a small, we were a team of 3 I had the camera kit and Fergus had the sound kit, and we had an assistant producer who kind of was carrying the chargers and everything. So we carried all our own gear, walked the entire way with our subjects. And it definitely, the physical aspect of it was a huge challenge. Going into it, early on, we sort of discussed, do we have a car, and do we meet people along the way and try that? And in the end, we sort of vetoed that idea, just because then the film wouldn't be what it is. You'd have all these staged moments at the touristy spots of the Camino that, or people sitting in albergues talking about the day, but we wouldn't have seen the day. We wouldn't have seen those incredible intimate moments or the breakdowns or the breakthroughs. And so that stuff, I think, really is what makes the film special.
A question came through that said, were there any stories or moments that were too personal to include without checking again with the participants? Or was there an agreement that when you started, anything on video could be captured and used?
So we had agreements with every subject in the film, and they had final approval of their image and use. So we had a big screening, I'd like to say, maybe 6 months before our first showing of the film, and we had everyone there in Melbourne, and everyone watched it for the first time, and it was a really moving experience, and lots of tears and lots of hugs, and everyone was thrilled. And they gave us their blessing to use everything in the film. So there was nothing that we lost, which, as filmmakers and first-time filmmakers, was a huge bonus for us. And now, having gone through our next film, we've had to lose things. So I look back fondly on those times, and the trust that we had with those subjects was really special.
I would imagine there was lots that you had to leave on the cutting room floor just for time. And I just imagine that would have been a really challenging process to go through what footage you were going to include. Was it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always with documentary and especially with a film like this where, you know, where we were rolling a lot, we'd film a lot, and then separately Fergus would be rolling audio files of, you know, as he's walking along with someone. If we weren't together, Fergus would be walking with someone and just roll up on audio if they started talking about something interesting or musing on something that we thought could be interesting in the film. And then separately, I'd be filming with someone as well sometimes, and then other times we'd be together. So we had a lot of footage because you just never know when somebody is going to have a little breakthrough, or you don't necessarily know where the important kind of moments are. And yeah, so we filmed a lot, but at the same time we had a good sense. It's like a, you know, a very complex jigsaw puzzle. You have these moments where whatever it might be, there's like the moment in the church with Terry and Mark, you know, filming that, you've got a sense like, this is a moment, this is incredible, this is obviously a scene that will make it into the film. And then you have other moments like that throughout the process, and then it becomes a case of, okay, how do we join all these moments together and still have a sense of narrative and time and structure that is enjoyable for an audience to watch. But yeah, there's always lots that we have to leave on the cutting room floor.
Were y'all editing as you walked?
No.
We put together a little teaser trailer towards the end, so there was some really quick editing, but really that was just sort of looking for the nice shots that might show it off, that, you know, we weren't going through properly, because I think our days were just so huge on the film. Like, we'd wake up pre-dawn to get out the door with everyone else, and be filming in the really nice, you know, morning light, and then we'd walk all through the day with our subjects, and then we'd get into wherever we might be staying that night, and then continue filming as everyone sort of, you know, might have a beer at the end of the day, or if there might be little interviews that we wanted to do, or more information that we wanted with somebody. Yeah, so it was a tricky one. And then of course we had to copy all the footage at the end of the night. So our days would start pre-dawn and then finish at 11 or 12 every night, and then we'd start it all over again the next day.
A question came through that, did the narrative change as you walked?
Yeah, there was a live recording, and there were times where we thought Sue wouldn't finish the Camino. So, you know, Noel and I were planning for multiple options of who would be there in Santiago at the end, and how would we capture that kind of euphoria of finishing and having all 6 of our subjects there. So yeah, the narrative would change, and then in the edit, it also changed. Some of the characters really came through in the edit, and others maybe didn't. Like, as much as we love Cheryl, she's not featured in the film as much as the other guys, but we spend a lot of time with Cheryl. So yeah, I mean, it's always the filmmaking process is interesting. You might have assumptions or opinions at the start, and then they totally change at the end.
A question came through, is the material that you didn't use this time usable for another film or maybe a later project?
Good question. Noel?
I probably not without more filming with our subjects. I think we'd like, there's definitely moments and some scenes, but generally they get left out because they're not as strong as what we'd put in the film. So there's definitely lots of amazing scenery and stuff that we couldn't fit in or didn't suit the narrative of the film to have those incredible towns at those moments that we were walking through the town. So yeah, there's lots of B-roll, but not necessarily story sort of key moments and whatnot.
We took a lot of drone footage. For anyone that has been able to buy the DVD or find the DVD, we do have like a 13.5 minute compilation of all the drones over each, well, we tried to make over each stage or each day we walked. So that's how we used that extra material in the DVD extras. So that was, yeah, something we put together. I was actually in Japan just before COVID. So we started looking into making a film on the Camino Kodo. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of the Camino Kodo, which is Japanese pilgrimage. But, you know, with COVID, that film was basically put on ice, and we've still got a lot of footage as well from Japan. So yeah, Noel and I talked about maybe making a global pilgrimage film, but I guess there's been other things happening during COVID.
Any questions from the group?
I'll just make a comment, I guess, since they talked about the drone footage. I see somebody else commented that they found the drone footage to be really amazing. And I'll just say that I thought that was also a really powerful part of the film, because it for me, it felt like the drone footage would be having like kind of a bird's eye view of the Camino, and then you would get, so it was very far away though from the subjects, but then you would get very up close and personal with them. So it was a really interesting juxtaposition, but also very beautiful.
Thanks, Amy. I can read out this question. Did you stay in public albergues, and did the whole group stay together in the same albergue? Yes, I would say for 90% of the walk, we were all in the same albergues. It was April, May. So it was just before their summer, and it was getting quite busy towards the end. And I think anyone who's walked the Camino Frances or into Santiago can appreciate how busy and crowded some of those albergues get towards the end of your Camino. So I think there were only, I don't know, I want to say 3 or 4 nights, Noel, that we weren't all together. There weren't enough beds for us to sleep together. But yeah, for 90% of the Camino, we were all together.
Which is definitely the way I'd do it again as well, because you just get those nights and moments where, you know, some of the great moments in the film, I think, are those bits at the end of the night, or, you know, towards I forget where we were, but there's a scene in the film where they're, you know, Terry and Julie and Cheryl are on the swings and just, you know, capturing these great childlike kind of little joyful moments. And so if we were staying in separate accommodation, we'd never get that. You'd only get the, you know, superficial stuff.
Did you plan out each day's trip ahead of time? Did you know the stages and the miles and all of that ahead?
Yeah, originally going into it, we weren't sure how the days would play out. Like, so we didn't start with a map, but I think after the second or third day, we kind of realized that we needed to plan where we would end up the next day, and we'd actually have our assistant sort of try and call ahead to the albergue and you know, lock in so many beds for us. Yeah, and then also it would be a ongoing discussion every day where, you know, if somebody was hurt or couldn't go as far the next day, we'd say, oh, okay, well, you know, we'll just end up at at this town instead, and we'll stay there, and then we'll get onto this town. So it was very fluid. It kept changing as we went.
There were, I would just jump in, there were some shorter days, but I think the longest day we walked was about 16 or 17 miles. So yeah, we would check in with all the pilgrims in the morning to see how they were feeling, and then as a sort of group we would decide how far people could walk that day. We wouldn't push it. And yeah, we were on a tight schedule, so we only ended up having one rest day halfway through in Leon. But the other days we walked sort of anywhere from 5 to 12 miles.
Can you all speak to the movie music that was used in the movie, especially the very beginning piece? I think it's also in the drone footage as well. It's so, to me as a viewer, it just brought me in and created this other world of these folks. And I'm just really intrigued how y'all picked the music.
Yeah, so I think we had the film, we had a composer put together about half of the film's soundtrack, and ideally he could have done all of the soundtrack, but we just didn't have the budget. So we had, I forget what budget we had, but we said, this is what we have, what can you do? And so he put together just an incredible score on such a short time frame as well, because we also, by the time we got some small funds to kind of finish the film, we'd been accepted into the Newport Beach Film Festival where the film was premiering. And so it was a really short kind of delivery window. And so we found this great New Zealand composer, Tom McLeod, and said, this is what budget we've got. This is the film. You know, we want a score that would transport people to the Camino, but also really tap into those key emotions or whatever might be happening at different story arcs in the film. And he did a phenomenal job for, I think he only had about 2 or 3 weeks, and he just did such a good job.
Any questions from the group? Okay, I can keep asking questions. Can you talk about the updates on the folks who are in the film? Can you tell us anything about them today?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a little Facebook chat that we all keep up to date with, and also mostly because Julie, I think we've both been through where Julie lives in Christchurch quite a bit, so we catch up with her quite often, and she's also been to Melbourne quite a bit. Julie's doing really well. She's you know, I think as happens with grief, it's never a clean cut process. I think she constantly struggles with it, but she's seeing someone and seems very happy, which is great to see. Sue's doing really well. She I remember after the film, she sort of her daughter sent me a message saying thank you for making the film. I've never seen mum so happy, and so that was a really special message. Sue's health isn't as good as she'd like it. I think her foot's just kind of gotten worse and worse, so she's definitely not walking as much as she'd like. And Mark and Terry, they're just so jovial that they, every time we check in with them, they're doing great. And then Claude's busy in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, and Cheryl's still having a great time working on her cruise ship job that she got during the film, which so I think everyone struggled a little bit in COVID and lockdown, as everyone did, but they're all doing really well now.
And also, Terry and Claude have released books. Claude released another book, and Terry ended up going back to walk the Camino Frances a third time. And just segueing into another question from Ellen, plans to walk another Camino route. I'd like to walk the Norte. I'd like to sort of spend a bit more time on the coast. I think we're kind of, being Australians and New Zealanders, we like being close to the water. So that's probably what I would do, or the Portuguese Camino, I think we've talked about as well.
Yeah, I would love to. I can't wait to get back on the Camino. When we're making the film, it's sort of, our whole minds are just engrossed in the film and the physicality of it, the technicality of it, and then also keeping track of, just where the shape of the story is going and what characters we need more information on, or who we need less of, and all that sort of thing. So my Camino experience is very different, I think, to what it should be. So I would love to go back with my family or alone, and just have a proper trip. And yeah, some of the other Camino paths, I think, sound very appealing. Some of the coastal ones, and we just heard talking to other people on the Camino, heard lots of great stories about other paths to take.
I can jump in and answer Linda's question maybe about filmmaking. So I went to university in Melbourne. It was a general media course, but I focused and specialized in film theory and became interested in production and working in sound. And in terms of being inspired to become filmmakers, we kind of became filmmakers overnight, I guess. We worked on a lot of people's films, and Camino Skies was a pretty exciting opportunity for us to sort of leap in the deep end and try and, tread water, and the film was a really joyful experience in terms of creating something that will live on. And Noel can talk to his training in education, but for me, the film was almost the best training, the best education that I could have with becoming a filmmaker.
Yeah, I totally agree with Fergus. After, I bypassed, I didn't go to university or college or anything like that. I sort of, went back when I was looking at what I wanted to do, I wasn't quite sure. And then so my mum suggested I just go out and get a job. And then the only things I were interested in were film and photography and music, and sort of, eventually that was what I fell into naturally. But yeah, I absolutely agree with Fergus. I think making this film was my training, at least. I'd worked for years before in advertising and video content and all sorts of things, but that's the passion has always been in film and documentary. And so, and really that was the incentive for us to go and make a thing. We wanted to challenge ourselves. We wanted to learn. I find that unless I have a project to sort of really sink my teeth into, that you don't get that learning. You can stay at home and watch videos and stuff, or read books, but until you get out and actually do a thing and make a thing, then you realize. Sorry, I've just noticed, William, your chicken. So that was my training, and then this next film that we're working on now has sort of stepped up that level again, where the filmmaking challenges have increased tenfold, which is challenging, but it's been good. It's been an interesting experience.
Can you all speak to the next project if you can?
Yeah, so the next film we're making is about a cult in New Zealand. So very different story to Camino Skies, obviously, but a similar approach where we've, it's an observational documentary. We've sort of embedded with this family who are taking legal action against this cult, and one of the main characters, John, is trying to be reunited with his family who remain inside, and his mother Sharon remains inside the community, but she joins this legal action and speaks out against them, and then their sister's involved in it. So it's this beautiful family story about taking on a quite a juggernaut. They're a 50-year-old cult. They have 600 members, and they're worth 60 million or something ridiculous. So and lots of terrible stuff's been happening inside the community. So it'll be a really interesting story to get out into the world.
Do you have a release date or time frame, or how Americans could watch it?
I think we're hoping that it'll be either in a film festival later this year, or out in America next year, on similar to what Camino Skies is, iTunes and Google Play next year.
I'm just putting the name and the website of the film in the chat for anyone that's interested. But yeah, we're about to release in New Zealand, which is very exciting. But probably, yeah, a little way off from America yet.
Any other questions from our group?
I have another comment, if I may. I found it interesting, Claude's story. So I know you kind of focused in on some of the other people, but one of the interesting threads that I followed through the film was, at the beginning, she talks about how I think I remember her saying, like, her daughter had moved away and she was kind of getting used to like being an empty nester or whatever, and kind of adjusting to not being a mom anymore. And then throughout the film, it felt like there were some moments where she was really like trying to mother some of the other people. And in a couple scenes, it almost felt like they were kind of like not having it a little bit, or uncomfortable with her being maybe a little too pushy, might not be the right word, but it felt a little that way. But then I also felt kind of a good closed loop for her toward the end of the film, where there was a moment where Sue was walking by herself, or you thought she was walking by herself, and she had a breakdown and just like kind of collapsed on the side of the road and didn't think she could go any further. And then at that moment, Claude comes back to her aid and says, like, I turned around and saw that you were struggling, so I came back to you. And I felt like that was a really beautiful moment too, because it not only allowed her to serve, like, through her pilgrim heart to Sue, but also to let her serve in the way that she needed to serve for her own story.
Yeah, absolutely. Claude's a really strong personality, and as happens, not everyone responds well to those kinds of personalities, but she has just such beautiful heart. And we loved that scene when where Sue was at one of her lowest moments, and Claude was there to kind of help her out, so that it was beautiful to see.
Yeah, I just want to commend you guys for how you were able to pull those threads together throughout the film. And obviously you know, each of those moments were individual moments. So, you know, you didn't know that they were ever going to come together that way, but that you were able to create that is really wonderful.
I just want to say I so much appreciated the documentary. I walked the Frances on my own, which I loved. Wouldn't have wanted to do it any other way, but it was so fascinating to me to see a group of people who weren't connected in any other way except for Terry and Mark experiencing the Camino together from beginning to end. So I loved it. I was so taken by it, and will definitely share it with others. And I'm really grateful that you all did it, and to the American Pilgrims organization for publicizing it, because I was so glad to have gotten to take part of it. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Susan. Christine?
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. I'm in Spain right now, and I'm going to be walking into Santiago tomorrow. So, but I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the film, and I showed it to both our chapter, but also to an OLLI class, which is Osher Lifelong Learning Institute for adults 50 and over. I taught a class on the Camino, and the class, and it just spoke to so many people. I feel done going to it was just wonderful.
Thanks, Christine.
Last chance, anybody? All right. Well, I want to say a huge thank you for those of you who joined us this evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. We're so grateful for your time. We're grateful for you, Noel and Fergus, who joined us today. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and the stories of your film, as well as the stories of the pilgrims who are in your film. We are very grateful for that, for this time together. Those of you who are American Pilgrims, this will be posted on the American Pilgrims YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to and see other stories and interviews and things that we've done that are posted there. Also, if you've not gotten your credential, if you're planning on walking, those are available on our website, as well as connections to local chapters. We right now have 57 local chapters, so hopefully there's one in your area. And we also have these events as well as other events that are going on around the US on our website. And as I mentioned, and as Joe mentioned as well, you can support American Pilgrims through your Amazon purchases. It doesn't cost you anything. You link your account at smile.amazon.com, and you can do that. And if you have any other questions, you can, of course, connect with us at American Pilgrims. We are here to help you and answer questions and all of those kinds of things. So we are very grateful. And with that, I will say buen camino to all of you.